Russia's last bridges to the south are quietly collapsing, not with missiles, not with bombs, with political decisions and boardroom moves. And the epicenter of this collapse is neither Ukraine nor Syria. It's a small but critical point in the heart of the Caucasus, Armenia. The Kremlin footage went viral this week. Armenian leader Pashinyan sat across from Putin wearing an authentic Armenia map pin on his lapel and mocked Russia's democracy. He emphasized that Armenia has too much democracy, that social networks are 100% free, and that there isn't a single political prisoner in Armenian jails. Yes, many of our citizens, well, not many, but some, think there is too much democracy in Armenia. Our social networks, for example, are 100% free. There are no restrictions at all. In the general context, to be honest, we don't have participants in the political process in places not so remote imprisoned. Watching Putin's face was enough. He was angry. Putin threatened with gas prices and migrants. Pashinyan smiled and refused. Putin's discomfort was written on his face, but he couldn't respond. The "we'll review economic relations" threats that followed fell flat because that Putin is gone. Pashinyan didn't submit to any of it. He smiled and said, "When the time comes, Armenian citizens will decide." This is happening at the table of the same leader who invaded 20% of Georgia in 5 days when Saakashvili tried to approach NATO. But that Putin is gone. The Ukraine war shattered the illusion of power. Behind this confidence isn't overnight courage. It's the collapse of a 27-year alliance. When Armenia gained independence, it found itself surrounded by 3 hostile neighbors. Russia was the only reliable protector. The military base at Gyumri, cheap gas, the CSTO security umbrella. This equation worked smoothly for years. The first fracture came in 2020, as Azerbaijan recaptured most of Karabakh in 44 days. Security guarantor Russia just watched. Moreover, it emerged Russia had sold weapons to both sides. When Azerbaijan fully recaptured Karabakh in 2023, 120,000 Armenians migrated in a single day. Russia quietly withdrew its peacekeepers. The security promise had been broken twice. Trust never came back. This collapse pushed Armenia toward the west. EU agreements, weapons from France and India, an EU hybrid response team. And the most strategic reflection of this trust collapse is the railway issue. The 2008 concession agreement had handed Armenia's entire railway network to Russian Railways subsidiary South Caucasus Railway for 30 years. On paper, an investment partnership. In practice, Moscow holding Yerevan's jugular. Tracks to the Azerbaijan and Turkey borders were deliberately left to rust. Regional integration was blocked. For the past 5 months, Pashinyan has been pursuing the process of taking this concession back. This isn't a hasty overnight decision, but a calculated step-by-step strategy. You didn't make the investments you promised. You let the lines rot. Either we manage them or you leave entirely. Moscow's response wasn't a superpower's fury, but desperation. Overchuk, the same Overchuk who threatened, pleaded a day later. "We're ready. We can start repairing the lines immediately." Suddenly, eager to fix lines he hadn't touched in years. The Armenian government knows this offer is a stalling tactic. Restoring trust is harder than laying track. And the strategic meaning of these railways extends far beyond Armenia. This looks like a railway dispute, but in reality, it's a systemic collapse threatening Russia's entire presence in the South Caucasus. Russia used these railways not to connect Armenia to the world, but to make Armenia dependent on itself, blocking regional integration and forcing everyone onto Moscow-centered routes. This was a deliberate choice. A sovereign state doesn't entrust its own transit infrastructure to someone else. But in 2008, Armenia had no alternative. Now there is an alternative, and the equation has collapsed. The effects of this collapse are hitting multiple Russian strategic interests simultaneously. One of Russia's biggest claims in global trade was the North-South Transport Corridor, a line from St. Petersburg through Moscow, across the Caucasus, to Iran's Bandar Abbas port, and onward to India's Mumbai. The Caucasus leg of this corridor ran through Armenia. The railway being severed breaks this corridor in the middle. Russia is losing the route it designed as an alternative to the Suez Canal and Western-controlled sea lanes. Reaching Iran via ships across the Caspian or by road through Azerbaijan is both costly and insufficient. Nothing can replace the railway's uninterrupted, cheap, massive volume transport capacity. And this isn't just a commercial loss. The severing of the land connection between Iran and Russia directly impacts military logistics and intelligence transfers. The physical infrastructure of Moscow's strategic relationship with Tehran is crumbling. The Turkey connection is a separate loss. Russia was using Turkey as a transit hub to evade Western sanctions. A railway through Armenia was the shortest route for Russian goods to reach Turkey and the Mediterranean. That route is now closing. When Armenian railways integrate into the Azerbaijan-Turkey network, a process accelerated by the TRIP project, Russian wagons moving on these tracks becomes technically and politically impossible. Even the physical gauge of the tracks will change. The transition from Soviet standards to European standards will mechanically prevent Russian trains from operating on these lines. And perhaps the most critical dimension in the short term, the gray lines. Sanctioned products smuggled into Russia through third countries has been the artery keeping Russia's economy alive since the war began. Armenia was one of the most important centers of this gray trade. Chips, electronics, luxury cars, spare parts flowed from Yerevan to Moscow. The abnormal surges in Armenia's foreign trade figures made this plainly visible. Losing railway control blocks this artery too. When the TRIP project and Western standard customs controls take effect, Russia running contraband on this line becomes impossible, and this directly damages Russia's capacity to circumvent sanctions. Finally, the Gyumri base, Russia's only military presence in the South Caucasus. Thousands of troops, tanks, air defense systems, logistics supplied entirely by railway. This base is Russia's closest military asset to NATO's southern flank, a strategic eye monitoring the Turkish border and the regional balance of power. When Armenia takes control of the railways, the Yerevan government can stop trains to this base at any time, citing maintenance or security risk. A military base without ammunition and fuel resupply is just concrete. Pashinyan isn't forcing Russian soldiers out, he's starving them logistically until they have no choice but to leave. Pashinyan hasn't yet demanded the base's closure, but since the CSTTO freeze, the base's legal and strategic legitimacy is already being questioned. Russia's logistics map now resembles a prison. Ice to the north, war and NATO walls to the west, China's crushing competition to the east, severed lines to the south. Railways are a country's circulatory system, and Russia is being expelled from the Caucasus circulatory system. The one sitting in the seat Russia vacated is the United States, directly. The Trump administration rebranding the Zangezur corridor as TRIP signals the scale of interest. This 43-kilometer line isn't just asphalt and rail. It will be equipped with fiber optics, power transmission lines, and strategic monitoring systems. A corridor built with U.S. capital right under Russia's nose. Putin planned to control Zangezur with FSB border guards. Now that corridor is opening under the American flag. Turkey and Azerbaijan are the biggest winners. Karabak's full recovery pushed Azerbaijan's regional weight to its peak. Armenia's distancing from Russia strengthens the Turkey-Azerbaijan axis further. The middle corridor's transport volume grew 70 to 90% in 2024 and is expected to reach 10 to 11 million tons by 2030. Numbers showing Russia's northern corridor monopoly has been effectively broken. The two countries are filling the space Russia vacated, not with military force, but with economic integration. For China, the equation is pragmatic. Beijing sees the middle corridor as part of Belt and Road. As the northern corridor becomes risky due to sanctions, cargo is shifting to this southern route, the silent winner of a route that bypasses Russia. And this gain also shifts the power balance in Beijing's relationship with Moscow. Russia's strategic partner is simultaneously the biggest customer of a route that cuts Russia out. Iran watches with anxiety. The strengthening Turkey-Azerbaijan-US axis is narrowing Iran's sphere of influence on its northern border. Zangezur could cut Iran's land connection through Armenia. Tehran is already cornered by the Iran war and Hormuz crisis. Losing influence in the South Caucasus deepens that encirclement. Moscow losing railway control also means losing its ally, Iran's security. eroding not just its own interests, but the integrity of its entire regional alliance network. And perhaps the most critical question, is this courage contagious? Kazakhstan openly distanced itself from Russia's Ukraine war, implemented Western sanctions, invested in middle corridor infrastructure. Tokayev rejected the Donbass referendums while sitting next to Putin. Uzbekistan is diversifying with the West, developing projects with China. Moldova is advancing toward the EU. Pashinyan telling Putin, "We have democracy, you don't," sent a shockwave through the post-Soviet space. If 3 million-person Armenia can break Russia's railway monopoly and get the US behind it, why can't Kazakhstan? Putin's worst-case scenario, the domino effect. If one ally goes, the others find courage. Putin's South Caucasus policy was built on divide and rule for years, dependence through weapon sales, loyalty through gas prices, mediation through peacekeepers. But Karabakh was lost, peacekeepers withdrew, CSTTO froze, and now the railways are going too. Each one a separate loss, but all parts of the same structural collapse. Pashinyan's attitude in the Kremlin is the symbol of this collapse, but not the cause. The cause is Russia bleeding its power in Ukraine, the West opening a door to the South Caucasus, and the new architecture of global trade routes that bypass Moscow. A 3 million-person country now has a say on the tracks Russia laid for a century, and the wagons are pointing not toward Moscow, but toward global markets. Russia is trapped in the south, ice to the north, war to the west, China's competition to the east, severed lines to the south. While Putin fights in Ukraine's swamp, he has permanently lost his last fortress in the south and his last lifeline in global trade. Some call this betrayal, but it's the inevitable price of Russia's own strategic blindness, and history shows that the first to leave an alliance is never the last. We're taking a very short break from our analysis for a very important announcement. Dear viewers, the Facebook page you see on your screen right now with 54,000 followers is completely fake. We have initiated legal proceedings against this pirate page, which has been stealing and publishing our months of hard work, our archive, and all our videos. However, now we need your help. We ask that you pause the video and click the Report Fake page link we've provided in the description below. On the page that opens, you can help us put a stop to this theft by selecting the intellectual property options. The only official Facebook page we have is the one you see on the screen right now. Viewers watching on TV can access our real page by scanning the QR code on the screen with their phones. Viewers watching on their phones can access our real page by clicking the official link in the About section of our channel. Thank you for standing by us in this just cause and for supporting us by following our official page. Now, we'll continue our analysis from where we left off. So, what are your thoughts on this topic? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay updated.